have Desmond Phillips here, and he's current running back of the Culver Stockton football team. And our topic is over racism. I have some questions I'm going to ask him. Has racism affected any of your experiences in sports, and do you know somebody who's affected?
Well, growing up, I played football all the time, so we would always play teams from like little small towns or whatever, and you can tell there was a lot of racism just throughout the whole game. You know, they say little racist slurs every once in a while. So,
Do you think racism in sports will ever change?
no, not really. I don't. It's a possibility, but you can't change the way people are.
Yeah. Why do you believe racism still exists today?
I think it's from the older generation. Just when you raise around that environment, you tend to think somewhat of what your parents think. So it's just you teaching them to be racist almost.
And do you believe there's any solutions to make racism non-existent?
Just educate people. Education, that's the only way you can really stop it, because it's kind of like an ignorant thing.
Well, thank you for being here, and let me interview you.
All right, we have here former defensive tackle of Culver Stockton College, Brandon Banks here. Can you tell me a little bit about your experience in sports and maybe how race has affected you?
Growing up, football was just always a given. There was no other sport other than basketball that I would actually have a desire to play. I mean, I was made to play sports when I was younger, but I mean, it was really all about football. When I moved to DeKalb, Illinois, to begin my junior year, I went out for the football team, and I mean, obviously it was a huge culture shock. I'm just used to, my home, and when I moved, it wasn't home at all. And during the season, coming in, like, I was a pretty decent player, so I was starting. Like, as soon as I touched the field, I was starting. And there were 3 kids, your typical farmer kids. How do you say it? But during the season, like, they were just always basically trying to, say I suck or whatever, or just trying to basically just get at me and stuff. And I would always let my talking show on the field.
So you basically felt like you were kind of targeted by your teammates?
Yeah, I mean, I was cool with the team, but it was just like these 3 players who, basically they were racist, and they would make jokes about being racist.
Do you think racism in sports can be changed?
I mean, as far as it being changed, it can if we all collectively come up with a proposal to, stop the racism. But, I mean, I don't really see that happening right now, because there's always something that somebody doesn't like about a certain person. So,
Okay. Well, thank you for your time, Brandon. All right, we have here Mr. Stephon Watson, former wide receiver for Culver Stockton College football team. Tell me a little bit about your experience in sports, and has race ever affected you, and how?
Well, I've been playing sports all my life. When I was younger, I started off playing mostly basketball and baseball. My mom, being the operating room nurse, she was too afraid to let me play football until I was around 11 or 12, because she had worked on kids who had career-ending injuries. Other than that, being in high school, I guess I wouldn't consider it racism, but going to a private school with a high black influence, the coaches did favor the black athletes a little more than white athletes in certain sports.
So do you feel that ever affected you? Do you feel like maybe the coaches were being unfair to some of the other players that weren't black, or did it not really seem to bother you because you were one of the favorite races?
It didn't really affect me, but in some situations, like, we had players that could have been playing, or should have been playing, but didn't get the chance to just because of, I guess, how good the other black kids were. For one instance, we had a white guy who wanted to play football, but they wouldn't let him play because they felt like the tight ends we had were good enough, when I honestly think he could have started.
So do you think racism can be changed in sports at all?
To be honest, no, because it's always going to be different races on the same team playing with each other, and you can't keep a black person from hating white people or a white person from hating black people if that's how they grew up, if that's how they were raised. I mean, you can put them in that environment so they can see things for themselves, but if they're closed-minded, that racism gonna stay.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, Mr. Watson. Racism is an issue that's been in sports for many years, and due to the way society is today, it may never get better. It may never be perfect, but there's always room for improvement when it comes to racism.
Throughout our presentation, we have many examples of racism, and we interviewed athletes on campus.
We want to thank everyone for watching. We had a great time making the documentary, and we hope you had a wonderful time watching as well.